Good type is also a global traveler. I think moving into new territories as a brand or service is quite daunting. At least the marketing and design task is pretty daunting. First of all, there's the language, and it actually, well, it boggles my mind, probably my westernized position. So Singapore has 4 official languages. South Africa has 11. India has 22, which is just nuts. So it's hard to know where to start from my perspective when it comes to choosing type. Also, other things that cause problems in the language, obviously, is translation. So our Western words mean different things in the languages within the West, let alone other places. We've got idioms, jargon, humor, slang that really don't help matters either. And so it's important that we take time to understand cultural differences and sensitivities. Even the meaning of color varies between territories and culture, which is why in the US, if you go to the McDonald's website, it'll be red. If you go to it in Italy, it'll be green. In China, it's black. Supporting more than one language causes challenges for type. So fonts that ship with many languages are actually quite scarce. The overall picture is getting better, but most type deals with the native language of the type designer. And I think it's really understandable because it's so hard to design a good typeface in the first place, right? For the language that you already know, let alone designing for a language that you don't fully understand. And so it's a hard skill to master. Some of the things that we need to think about as designers that relate to typography and text with international design start with direction. So it was a study with a group of adults in Italy where they were asked to draw a boy kicking a ball. And so most of the sketches came out like this. And they ran the same study in the Middle East, and most of the sketches came out like this. And then they ran the same study with some bilingual people, and the results were split down the middle. There's a theory that within the first year of learning to read, that you get what's called a directional bias inbuilt, and the way that you see the world from there forward is either left to right or right to left. It's really interesting. So what that means for design is that basic patterns of usability and utility may be different than what we expect. So where do you go to find a menu? Where do you find the off button? And so on. This is SST, designed by Akira Kobayashi at Monotype. And the brief for SST was global first. So we designed this for Sony. And the clever thing, I think, about what Akira did with this was much like with Univer. He set out intentionally to make a non-trendy font because he knew that a trend in one country is unlikely to be a trend in another, and trends change. So this is a font with 93 languages and 8 scripts, which is quite an undertaking. One of the trickiest parts about international design, I think, is type pairing again. It's fun though. And so some typefaces, as we discussed, already ship with alternative languages and character sets, which is great. Others don't quite do that. So this is Amaria, designed by Nadine Shaheen, lovely typeface, released this year. And it was designed specifically with screen legibility in mind for Arabic text. Nadine designed the font, finished it all out, and then afterwards thought about what typeface from a Latin perspective would pair well with that, because she didn't design the Latin into it. And so she ended up settling on Charter here by Matthew Carter, which is what you see in the word Amaria, which is a really nice choice. It just goes back to the point that I was making about if you're not sure about pairing, ask the designer. They would love to help you. They think about it a lot. If you do have to look for yourself, here are a couple of tips. So you don't actually need to know about the language necessarily. You don't actually need to know a lot about font classifications or any of the technical aspects of type. You can probably see here that Futura, which is quite monolinear, would be the technical term, which means there's very little variation between thick and thin. It's all really one width all the way around. So you want to pair it with a font that looks like that in the other language. In this case, Tazugani in Japanese might work. This is FF Meta. It's quite compressed, and the color's a little black when you stand back from it. So if you were pairing that with something in Arabic, you might choose something that's also quite compressed, and even some of the rhythm there is the same. And then maybe something like Sabon. Sabon Next actually is it's a remix of Garamond, really. It's a lovely typeface, and it is serifed and has more contrast, sort of middle amount of contrast. So there are thicks and thins and serifs and little blobs, and you compare that with a typeface. In this case, this is traditional Chinese, that has those characteristics, whether you can read the language or not. These are some nice examples of these things in motion. Back to this example from earlier. That's very impressive to my eyes, to be able to find so many typefaces from various places in the world, from a language perspective, that actually sit well together. It's very impressive. Okay. This is where the real challenge is from a graphic designer's perspective. Omnidirectional design is really tricky. Oh yeah, I should probably mention, if you're curious about language support for a font that you already have, you're not really sure how far it goes, there's some really great tools from some of the foundries online. This is from underwear.nl. And they've got a web page, and you drag the font onto the web page, and it analyzes the font and tells you all about the amount of language support that's built into it already. It can be quite useful. So, good type is a global traveler.